Welcome to another edition of Waiver Wire Tuesday, where we help you address all your NFL Week 11 waiver wire needs. This is the Fantasy Alarm live stream, FA Sports Talk. My name is Jen Piacenti. I'm your host. I'm joined by our managing editor, Jon Impemba, and we're going to help you make some tough decisions at running back, quarterback, wide receiver, tight end, and even defenses we're going to talk about today. Jon, how is your Tuesday?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. Like I said, we're heading into the end of the fantasy football season here. Fantasy football playoffs are 3 weeks away essentially for those in regular leagues that have week 14 as their playoffs. So it's funny to think that somebody that you may pick up right now could be a key to you winning a fantasy championship this season.
But absolutely it can. We are down the home stretch right now. Now is when it matters. A lot of you are fighting for your playoff spot. Only a few weeks left. Let's just kick it off and start off at the quarterback position. I got to ask, is the number one waiver wire target this week, especially for people who are without Josh Allen, Jameis Winston?
Yeah, I think it has to be, knowing that, Drew Brees is dealing with the multiple rib fractures, the collapsed lung. He's not on IR yet, but I'm seeing today that he's going to go for a second opinion. And get researched on, what exactly is the issue. They thought maybe it was only 5 fractured ribs. Apparently it could be more. But how do you not like with the schedule coming up for the Saints? Just the next 3 games that are on their schedule here, Atlanta, Denver, and Atlanta. So all those, favorable matchups for the pass there with Winston. We know he likes to throw downfield. Last year led the league in passing yards, had 30 touchdowns, led the league in passing yards per game. Now also led the league in interceptions with 33. Probably not going to run, obviously, the same offense. I think Sean Payton will rein him in a little bit, but he's got plenty of weapons to do some damage here. If you need a quarterback, if you've been rolling with Daniel Jones, Baker Mayfield, Carson Wentz, Derek Carr, you've been trying to stream any of these guys week to week, there's probably no better option with upside than Jameis Winston.
I bet he's going to be owned in a lot of DFS this week too. Over 5,000 yards last year. Yeah. Now, we're not expecting that in New Orleans, as you mentioned, but he does have a lot of weapons, and certainly, again, as you mentioned, not the Bruce Arians offense, a different kind of offense. But I imagine Alvin Kamara will be just fine, and I'm kind of looking at Michael Thomas.
Yeah,
expecting him to have a bounce back.
So Winston went 6 of 10 passing, coming in the second half of the game on Sunday, and he completed, I think, 4 of the 6 passes were to Alvin Kamara. They were dump offs to the running back. So, he's going to look to him. That's just their offense right now. They were up in that game too. They didn't really need to, take a lot of shots or run a different offense there. But I think you're right. It's going to go to a lot of Kamara. Michael Thomas being back, though he hasn't really been very productive yet. Again, we're looking at matchups where he's going to have a good chance to pop off here. And the Saints passing defense this year hasn't been very strong. So Atlanta could very well get into a shootout here, and Winston may have to throw.
All right. I can't believe I'm asking this, but is Alex Smith someone we should also possibly put on our waiver wire list? Like, let's say you can't afford Jameis Winston. You have Josh Allen on buy, or maybe, hopefully you're not streaming, Nick Mullins and right. Danny Dimes right now, but maybe you are, maybe in a really deep league. I've just got to wonder about Alex Smith. I mean, to me, I look at it and I'm like, well, he's thrown for over 300 yards, like 2 weeks in a row now. We know he loves the check down. By the way, McKissick's still an option only in PPR leagues, though. Yeah. Only in PPR. Just a ridiculous amount of targets. But is it possible that he can get into the end zone and this can turn into something profitable for your team?
I mean, listen, he's throwing a ton. He threw 55 times last game against Detroit. He completed 69% of his passes the week before, completed 75%. So they're having him throw a ton. He's being efficient. It is because he's largely throwing these short dump offs to the running back. We saw McKissick 2 weeks ago have 14 targets. I didn't think we were going to see that again. He tops it this week. But you look again at the upcoming schedule for Washington, Cincinnati this week. We know you can throw all over them. Dallas the week after that. 2 really strong matchups coming up for the Washington football team. The problem there is, who are his weapons? What can you really rely on outside of Terry McLaurin in that offense? But he's throwing at a high rate. He's completing a lot of passes. I think, if he could just find the end zone at least once, he can pay off, these yardage totals here and make for a decent grab. So I think there's a potential for him in these next upcoming weeks. If you need a spot start, maybe you just lost Nick Foles or something like that, and you're really in the league where you have nothing else going for you. Yeah, I think you have to take a look at him.
I mean, if you just lost Nick Foles, then yeah, Alex Smith is probably still an upgrade.
Right.
Wow. Yeah. I guess that happens. It happens. And speaking of, I think that it's actually benefited Logan Thomas a bit. There's, very little at tight end, but Logan Thomas is going to continue to see those targets because the short range targets are what Alex Smith is going to do.
Yeah, he saved me in DFS last week because he wasn't really being targeted often earlier in that game. But then, the second half, especially the fourth quarter, they started going to Logan Thomas a bit more, and he was able to, $3,300 last week. Got you 10 fantasy points, and how bad the tight end position has been. If you're going to get a guy that's going to get 6 targets, you're basically have as much upside as possible there.
I want to ask you how you feel about Jake Luton for Jacksonville. I've been kind of impressed with him. I mean, I know it wasn't a great if you look at the stats from Sunday, but the wind in that game was awful. Right. And if you watched it, it was a lot of fun to watch because you saw Aaron Rodgers he was kind of back against the wall there for a little bit. And he ended up coming back. It was fine, but it was a feisty team. And I'm wondering, do you think Jaylen Lincoln could be someone to stash or keep around in a super flex or in an emergency? Because we are getting to the end of the season where people are starting to drop like flies. More and more.
I mean, here's what we know. We know that the Jacksonville Jaguars are not going to be winning many games, if any. So they're going to have to be throwing the football. They have Pittsburgh this week. It's not a great matchup. Obviously, we just saw Pittsburgh, give Joe Burrow a bunch of trouble this past week. And Jacksonville nearly doesn't have the weapons that the Bengals do there with Boyd and Higgins. Chark has been fine. Keelan Cole found the end zone there. You mentioned if you're in a super flex, sure, it makes sense to keep Luton. I don't know if this is the week I want to go ahead and play him, though. The schedule, at least for AFC South teams, do get a little bit easier, especially like a team like Jacksonville. Coming up, the matchups are a little bit more favorable. So, sure, I could see maybe spot starting him in a week or two. But this week, he's not a guy I'm looking to put in my lineup.
All right, well, let's head over to the running back position. A few interesting guys here. I'll start out with the Chargers. Is it time to take Kalen Ballage seriously? Now, we've seen Austin Eckler out bragging that he's about ready to come back, but from what I understand, he's still only running in a straight line. I don't think he's going to be back this Sunday, and I think they should be careful. Justin Jackson's on the IR. Josh Kelly doesn't seem to be impressing. Troy Pope, I'm not sure why we didn't really see much of Troy Maine. Makes no sense to me, but is it time to just go ahead and go all in on Kalen Ballage, at least for the next week or two? I mean, and to be honest, even if Eckler comes back, would they still stay with Kalen Ballage as the bigger goal line back and let Eckler be the pass catcher?
Yeah, so that's the real question. Now I don't believe that they would. How they were using Kelly and Eckler earlier in the year, I think, is how they planned on using Eckler in terms of usage this year. Kelly was getting sort of that goal line short yardage work. Right. Eckler was being the primary pass catcher and sort of some of the early down production as well. Now, since he's been out, they put Justin Jackson in that role as the early down back and more as the pass catcher, too. He's catching more balls than Kelly was. And Kelly kind of maintained that short yardage goal line role, but now he's basically lost that to Kalen Ballage. So it's very possible that when we find that Eckler comes back, that Ballage does move into sort of that goal line short yardage role. Kelly could just be used as a change of pace spell option, and Eckler, his receiving skills are just so superior. I don't see a reason they wouldn't utilize him, but I still think at least early on, maybe not the first game back, they'll mix it in, but I still think their plan early on is get Eckler in that early down work. So short yardage, goal line, Ballage could definitely be that guy. Passing downs, early downs, I think Eckler will maintain his role.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. So, guys, keep an eye on that situation, but I think it's worth throwing in a bid for Kalen Ballage if he's still available in your leagues. Now, Damian Harris, Patriots fan. I like Damian Harris a lot. And I have to say, I felt like an old lady because when they interviewed him after the game, I just kept thinking to myself, what a nice young man. What a lovely young man giving such a nice interview. So
listen,
positive.
You want your running backs to be silent and, run the football and, score touchdowns. So
yeah, and that's what he did. And he was just so lovely. And I was like, oh, I really like Damian Harris. I liked his numbers. I liked his stat line, but now he's a nice young man too. So I think I'm going to get him on my teams where I can, but I'm not sure how owned he is. It says here in Dan's article, by the way, Dan Malin puts out a waiver wire article every Tuesday morning on Fantasy Alarm. You always want to check that out. He says that Damian Harris is 44% owned in ESPN. If that's the case, you need to go get Damian Harris. Don't you agree?
Yeah, listen, if Damian Harris is available, there's zero reason for you not to get him, especially, he just ran for 100 yards against Baltimore, which is supposed to be a really strong run defense. Now, again, the weather was insane in that game. Who knows what was really going on, if they even want, how committed maybe they were to playing in that type of weather. Easier game to run on for sure. But now he's getting Houston this week, and that is a matchup that I think, Jen, you could go out there and run 100 yards against that defense. They're so bad.
Sure.
So it would be a stunner, an all-time stunner if Damian Harris would lay an egg this week.
I would run out at the 1 yard line just to screw up everybody's bets.
Yeah, so
that's what I would do.
Maybe you had money on Houston, you wanted to cover the spread,
Yeah,
saved all the bettors there, and
Texans.
For the Texans. So it worked out if you took the points in that game. Wild play by Nick Chubb. It's we can talk about that if you want to. It's wasn't necessary. Wasn't the Todd Gurley situation?
10-point league. No.
Yeah, it was a 2-score lead. It wasn't Todd Gurley's situation, which everybody's talking about. But listen, I like Harris a lot this week. I'm surprised to see him available in as many ESPN standard leagues as we're looking at now. A little bit of a caveat there. I'm sure ESPN, some of those leagues aren't active and excuse the ownership. If you're in a highly competitive league, which I know a lot of you watching this likely are, Harris was probably drafted and stashed on IR this year, right? Like, people were waiting on Harris to come back. He's got 300-yard games since his return. He had 71 yards against the Jets on 14 carries. And the schedule, again, coming up for him, Houston, Arizona, and the Chargers, all great matchups to run the football. So I could see Harris, being a key part and should for sure be on in your rosters.
Do you have any concern, though, about his touchdowns constantly being taken away by Rex Burkhead or James White?
Yeah, so not necessarily White per se. In Burkhead, only to like a small extent. It's more Cam Newton, who's up to, I think, 10 touchdowns now on the season rushing, or something in that range, right? He's close to double digits. I know Kyler Murray got to 10 this week. I think Cam's close in that general range as well. So, when they get in the red zone, oftentimes Newton's definitely a guy that gets out there. They love Rex Burkhead in the red zone because he's the dual threat. Like James White, when he's out there, you really know he's going to catch the football.
He's going to.
Damian Harris, when he's out there, he's probably running the football. But Burkhead does both really well. And that's why they like using him in those red zone sets. So you're not wrong to think that Burkhead could vulture it. But I still think if Harris is really doing the work, they get down there, they could give him some early attempts at the touchdown this week. I'm definitely going to look to him for some lineups for sure.
But Burkhead may be a great GPP play.
Yeah, listen, I grabbed Burkhead in a handful of leagues this year in late rounds because I wasn't totally sure how the Patriots offense would work. I like the fact that he was sort of that tweener back between the two of them. Felt maybe he would be utilized more in the Cam Newton offense because of the unpredictability of how he would have. So I took him late, like last rounds in some best balls, and it's been hit or miss, but on the weeks where it's hit, it's been huge.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about Miami. So they did put Jordan Howard on waivers. So we'll keep an eye on where he's going. I'm not sure if you guys will be interested in that, even if he does. But it looks like Salvon Ahmed may have himself a job and someone that you should consider adding. Obviously, Gaskin's still on the IR, but probably coming back soon. Same with Matt Breida. So there is still a level of question around it. But how much would you consider putting on Salvon Ahmed?
I mean, we were expecting Gaskins to miss 3 weeks, obviously being on the IR. And in the 2 weeks in which he's been out, Ahmed's looked, fantastic. And obviously last week he took it to another level. And I think when he comes back, Gaskins, that is, it's going to be really interesting because prior to his injury, they didn't use really any of the other running backs. Breida barely saw the field. We know Jordan Howard was a healthy and active. So is Flores in that offense going to be committed to going back to that one backfield where Gaskins, it was the 3-down play? Or is Ahmed impressed enough to earn more of a snap share in this offense? Because we hadn't been seeing that. So I wouldn't go overboard, unless I was a Gaskins owner and he was still available. I'd probably still only spend 10-15% there, unless we get more word this week that maybe Gaskins is progressing slower in his recovery, or we hear word that Ahmed could really build himself into a bigger role. But I hate really spending a lot of my money on a guy whose role in the offense I'm really unsure about, as the starter's nearing a return. All
right, I got to ask you this sticky question that none of us like being asked. What do we do with the Indianapolis backfield? Do we go put a lot of money on Nyheim Hines? Do we roll with Jordan Wilkins? Or do we keep believing that Jonathan Taylor is the guy?
It's hard
because this weekend
it's
it should be
hard.
they're facing Green Bay. Somebody's going to
Yeah,
have a good week.
I know. Listen, they should have had a good week rushing last week for Taylor, and it was Hines that was running the football. And, a lot of people, the way I have to explain it when people ask what's going on and why Hines is being so effective, it's because he's such a threat in the pass game that he's running against these softer fronts because teams have to sort of account for his ability to go out and catch the football. Where if Taylor is in the backfield or Wilkins is in the backfield, defenses run more of a heavy set. They're running into defenses that are prepared to stop the run. So Hines is getting a lot of these drop plays, a lot of these pitch plays, and he's able to run up against, a nickel defense or a cover defense where it's more safeties and corners on the field. He can gash those teams that have softer fronts. Are they going to continue to do that? They could. And it's proven to be successful when they've committed to that. Taylor just never had an opportunity last week. Every time you touched the football, the Titans were already in the backfield ready to tackle him. So it was disappointing from that aspect. It's not like Jordan Wilkins had a bang-out game either. It was really Hines. So it was sad to see that Taylor saw the fewest amount of snaps that he had all season. I think it was only 23, 26%, somewhere in that range. I can't say trust Taylor unless you have no other options, really. It should be a flex play at best. But they're all at this point boom or bust. You don't really know week to week. Hines has only had 3 games above 8 fantasy points this year. Those 3 games have all been monster outputs, but obviously it shows that as we're heading into week 11, he's been very inconsistent. So, if you need a back, throw some money on Hines, but you can't think he's going to be the guy going forward.
Speaking of Indianapolis, Michael Pittman. Before we started this season, I had him in a lot of leagues. Added him late. I really liked the idea of Michael Pittman being across from T.Y. Hilton. I liked that he was going to be the Phillip Rivers, all that. As time went on, I ended up having to drop him over the season based on his injury and needing to make other moves with COVID. And now I'm like, oh, bummer. I may have to just go back and bid again on Michael Pittman. Finally had a 100-yard game. Do we think this is going to continue?
I mean, I think because of the inconsistency in the running game, honestly, it may be that the Colts start looking to throw the football a little bit more. We love that we saw that against Tennessee. Again, Tennessee's defense this year has been very disappointing. Can't really stop the run or the pass. He saw 8 targets, caught all 7 of those 8 for 101 yards. The week before, though, 7 targets there, and that's what I like seeing. I like seeing that Rivers is throwing him the football. T.Y. Hilton came back for this game, and we still saw 8 targets go Pittman's way. They don't really have much else there. Zach Pascal really going to be someone that demands target share. The tight end seemingly started to subsided a little bit in terms of their usage and volume. And, you want to talk about the matchups that are coming up. If Green Bay doesn't get Jair Alexander back this week, Green Bay, Tennessee, Houston, all, again, favorable matchups to kind of throw and put some points up for. So Pittman for sure is one of my top ads this week at the wide receiver position. I, like you, was someone who drafted him thinking he'd be a good number 2 in this offense. Again, I did a ton of best ball, so I still kept my share of him in those leagues, but it's certainly worth grabbing him if he's on the waiver wire this week.
You know who else I drafted early? We're jumping back to the running back for half a second, expecting more from was Cam Akers. And we did finally see that Cam Akers actually led the team in touches this week. However, Malcolm Brown with 2 touchdowns, Darrell Henderson with 1. But should we be encouraged if Cam Akers is out there? Is it time to go ahead and add him back? I'm actually still holding him in my auction league with the idea that it could still happen for him.
I mean, it surprised me to see him on the field because we hadn't really seen that previously in weeks, where he was healthy and just, basically inactive. Maybe coming out of the bye was a reason for that. They came out of the bye. Maybe they had a game plan to get him more involved. Now, that said, he still only saw like 23% of the snap count. Henderson saw 33% of the snap count there, and Brown himself saw 41%. So while he led the team in carries, he was the fewest snaps, by far on the roster. So can we trust it? Probably not. They have Tampa Bay and San Francisco coming up, not teams I want to run the football against. So, if you're desperate.
But I have to say, I would have thought that about Seattle too. Seattle actually has a good run defense. That game was so weird.
It was. I did
not
weird.
Enjoy it.
And Goff let us all down for those who expected a shootout there. Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, listen, they have a good run defense. They're in Tampa Bay. That's another thing that I don't really like. We
Yeah.
saw them bottle up Mike
Yeah.
Davis last week. So
Yeah.
I'm probably not still. I'm not going to go to Akers. I was glad to see him finally get on the field, but McVay is going to ride the hot hand. And even though he led the team with the 10 carries, 3 rushing touchdowns were scored, and none were by him. It was 2 by Brown and 1 by Henderson. So
Right.
really killed the value there.
So someone you and I were both on, I know he was in my bargains video. I know you spoke about him many times, including on Alarm After Hours with us on Friday. Josh Reynolds.
Right.
Is it time to take Josh Reynolds seriously? Because he's getting just as many targets as the other guys. What does it see? 27 targets over the last 3 games. And he led the receiving yards for this last game versus the Seahawks. So is it time to say, or is this another Sean McVay thing where it's like, this guy for 3 weeks and then I change my mind, where it's going to turn out to be like the backfield where you just can't predict it. Like, for a while it's Cooper Kupp is the guy. For a while, Tyler Higbee's the guy. Right now it's Josh Reynolds. And how long can we expect the Josh Reynolds train to last?
So the one thing I want to point out with Reynolds was earlier in the year, his snap share was only sitting around, 60% ish, depending on the game, the average over the first handful of weeks. But since, I think it's probably week 7 or 8, I think it was, he's seeing 80+% of the snap share. So they're sort of adjusting their offense in formations and running a lot more 3 wide receiver sets. If he's going to be on the field in 3 wide receiver sets, then he's going to be targeted. Now, is he going to be the number 1 targeted guy in their team? Essentially, you take away the 20 target game from Cooper Kupp. It's number 2 there has been Josh Reynolds, even above Woods. So I think you definitely need to add him. They're going to throw the football. If they're running 3 wide receiver sets, he's going to be on the field again. Likewise, we just mentioned with Cam Akers, tough schedule sort of coming up. Tampa Bay is not going to be great. I know San Francisco, not the defense it was earlier in this year. Now that they're dealing with a lot of injuries, Arizona, again, not the hardest defense to throw against. We've seen in past, but they still have guys like Patrick Peterson and whatnot. But defenses are scheming to more shut down Woods and Kupp, and I think that's leading to a lot of Reynolds. So I like him. It's hard to argue again with the volume, and I'm a slave to the target numbers. It's one thing I always go back and forth with Howard Bender, especially when it came to like our AJ Green battles this year. I'm like, I can't ignore a guy getting 10+ targets in 4 of the games so far this year. There are times where he's just getting all that volume. You can't just go away from him. So same way right now with Josh Reynolds, the volume is there for him. You got to trust it.
Yeah. All right, we're going to go a little deeper because I get to do the deep cuts videos. So now's when I get to put you on the hot seat. To figure out if you like these guys too. All right. Talking about someone that's about 5% owned, Denzel Mims. I think maybe people have forgotten because they were on bye last week, but he had a great week versus New England. He didn't get the touchdowns. Perriman got that and kind of stole the show that way. But he got a lot of targets, 18 targets in 3 games so far. So that's pretty good for a rookie. Do we think, is he someone that we should speculatively add, play him in a flex or as a wide receiver 3?
I think he is an interesting ad. I don't know necessarily how much we can trust it entirely. In that game against New England, Jamison Crowder was back, and New England does one thing very well, and it's take away basically your best option. And they make you get beat by other players. And in that week, Rashard Perriman was the one that beat New England, and Mims got the targets because they shut down Crowder. He only had 2 targets. They've now had the bye week to get Crowder a little bit even more healthier than he was. So I fear, or not fear, but feel like when Crowder is on the field and healthy and not facing a team that's going to scheme to eliminate him, he's going to be the one that dominates a lot of the targets there. Perriman being back healthy, I think, is still going to be a guy that gets targeted a lot. Him and Joe Flacco have a little bit of chemistry. They were both on the the Ravens, when Perriman entered the league through the draft. So I like Mims. I think there's some upside potentially with him, because both Crowder and Perriman are injury prone. But I think when everybody is healthy, those are the 2 that are probably going to dominate the snaps. I would take Perriman probably over Mims, I think, if they were both available in your leagues.
Okay, and here's someone I had in a deep cuts video, I think a week or 2 ago, but I think maybe we need to start taking him seriously. Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Is it time to take him seriously? I mean, I know the issue is it seems like it's a big play or nothing for him, but he's being consistent with these big plays. I look at him, it's kind of like Nelson Aguilar, where you're like, all right, well, I don't like it, but maybe I have to accept it.
Yeah, the one thing I think he's really benefiting from has been the injury to Alan Lazard. You look at the first 3 weeks of the year, Lazard is playing 90+% of the snaps, and MVS was down around 60. And since that injury, it's been Valdez-Scantling that's been playing, 80 to 90% of the snap count. Alan Lazard has been designated to return from IR. He's going on week 3 now since that designation. So he's expected to come back. If not this week, I think he has to come back next week, or he's lost for the year. So if he gets activated, what does that do for MVS and his snap count? And while he has been basically an all or nothing play, that too sort of lends me to worry a little bit about the consistency of his value. So, if Lazard is out this week, then sure, I'm okay with going ahead and making a 1 week play for MVS. They go ahead and they have Indy this week. It's not a great matchup. The Colts have the best pass defense, or one of the top 3 pass defenses in football this year. But if they're going to have that home run ability, then, there's at least a potential for him to score. So don't mind it. Don't love it. If Lazard is back, I'd much rather see if Lazard's available than Valdez-Scantling.
And getting even grosser in this deep cut, should we take Alex Collins seriously? Is there any need to add him in a deep league?
It depends on the health of guys like Hyde and Carson. Right. I was surprised last week once Hyde and Carson were ruled out. And unfortunately, and I apologize to everybody who's in the Fantasy Alarm chat, I was telling you to play DJ Dallas. I thought Dallas was going to be more involved than he was. I knew Collins was there. He played the week before, but wasn't really involved that much. I did not see him or anticipate him taking over that backfield. So if Hyde and Carson are out again, then yeah, Collins is a guy that you have to take a look at. Now, obviously, you won't know that information until Sunday, and you have to make your waiver claims now. So yes, I think if you're in need of a running back, you throw some money on Collins and hope that he is going to be the lead back again this week.
Just bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. Okay, we are running up against the clock, so we'll rush through this. Tight end, anyone interesting? I noticed I really liked Jordan Reed. What I saw from him, I was surprised that one. Did you see that catch he did with the one-handed grab?
It's funny because there was a tweet out there. They're like, "Oh, Jordan Reed playing like George Kittle," and I'm like, everybody already forgot that that's what Jordan Reed used to do when he was healthy. Back in like Washington, he was an elite tight end for fantasy purposes. You just literally could not stay on the field. And the one thing that was huge, I think I said this to you and Fensty on Alarm After Hours on Friday. When you asked me about Dwelly or Reed, I was concerned about the snap count because in his return game, he saw just 13 snaps, and there was no real indication on what that would jump to this week. And I was worried that if they kind of kept him low, that he wasn't going to be able to pay off the tag. But he played 44% of the snaps, and I think it could potentially only go up from there. And we know that he can be a top target on that offense. So I'm for it again this week. If he's going to play 40 to 50% of the snaps, I like Reed a lot.
All right, sounds good. And just quickly touching on defenses to stream, the Chargers are facing the Jets this week. So I think that's probably my number one target. The Dolphins looking like a top 3 defense practically at this point, right? They look.
Yeah, they're getting after it. I mean, they've been aggressive, going after the quarterback here. They've gotten a handful of sacks now. They're, turning the ball over on special teams as well. They had a block kick. We know they've had defensive touchdowns. And if Denver is going to be without Locke this week, or even if or not then, is it Denver? Who are they playing this week? They're playing Denver, right? So if they're not going to have Locke this week, you're going to like the matchup, but even if Locke is playing, I'm going to like it because he's not 100%. He's been turning the ball over a ton as well. So while they're going to be in Denver, and sometimes that's a struggle for traveling teams, I'm a big fan of what Miami has been doing.
Me too. It's been exciting. They're just an exciting team. Okay, guys, our time is up already. Those are your waiver wire claims that Jon Impemba and I think are pretty good for this week. I did throw out some pretty nasty ones in there. So if you're in deep leagues, hopefully you can scrape something up off the bottom of the barrel. But in the meantime, Dan Maitland's waiver wire article is available on fantasyalarm.com. We will be in the chat to help you know how to spend your fab budget. I know sometimes it's the trickiest part is knowing how much to bid.
Right.
But as we were talking about before the stream, you're at the point in the season where if someone is really going to be a game changer, you should go ahead and bid on them because there's probably not going to be a lot more of those left.
Yeah,
Jameis Winston, for instance.
Yeah, Jameis Winston, for instance. Listen, and before we wrap this up real quick, you may not need a quarterback today, but if something happens to your quarterback, look at what the waiver wire looks like right now. And if you don't have a backup for the playoff run, you may be forced to pick up like an Alex Smith or, who knows, Daniel Jones, a
Nick
Derek Carr.
Mullins.
Yeah,
Yeah.
someone who named Mullins, right? There's nobody with more upside that's available in the waiver wire right now, a quarterback than Jameis Winston's going to be. There's potential that Drew Brees is going to go on IR. He could be out till the actual NFL playoffs start. He's going to miss at least the next 3 weeks. You got to, at least as a safety net, consider picking up Jameis Winston for your lineup. If nothing else, you keep him away from somebody that could be using a quarterback in your league as well. So this is a time to spend whatever money you have left, really, because he is a game changer in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Jon, thanks. It's fun as always. You guys tune into the Fantasy Alarm live stream tomorrow, same time, 3 p.m. Eastern time, and we'll be back with more sports info, everything you need to know to win your fantasy football leagues. We'll catch you next time.